The galaxy was crumbling. From the outer rim to the core, the once vibrant Terran Federation had been overwhelmed by the Hovrak Empire, a race of ruthless, reptilian conquerors. The Hovrak had swept across the galaxy with brutal efficiency. Planets fell like dominoes, their populations wiped out or enslaved. The Federation had fought valiantly, but it was only a matter of time before they, too, would fall. Amid the chaos, the Federation's leaders convened in a hidden underground facility on Earth, a place that had remained secret even from most of humanity. Here, deep beneath the city of New York, they gathered to reveal their last hope. Commander Ezra Vance, a grizzled veteran of countless battles, stood before a massive display, watching as reports of Hovrak victories continued to stream across the screen. He was a man who had seen it all: decades of war, the loss of entire fleets, entire systems. Yet even now, as humanity's extinction loomed, his face remained impassive. "This is it," Admiral Helena Graves said quietly, stepping into the room. Her voice was steady, but there was a trace of desperation in it. "The final move. The Warborn are ready." Ezra turned to her, his gaze hardening. "Are you sure? These soldiers, this genetic miracle you've been working on, they're our last shot. We can't afford failure." Helena nodded, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "They're ready. But it's not just about power. It's about what they represent. The Warborn are more than soldiers. They are humanity's hope, born from the very essence of who we are, from our strength, our resilience, our will to survive. They've been enhanced, but they still carry the heart of humanity within them." A chill swept through the room as Ezra processed her words. The Warborn weren't just genetically altered humans. They were the product of years of secret research, combining the very best of human potential with the cutting-edge technology of the Federation. Each one of them had undergone radical enhancements, from physical improvements that made them stronger and faster to mental upgrades that made them more efficient in battle and capable of predicting enemy moves. They were the ultimate warriors. But with all their power, the Warborn were still human, with all the complexities, emotions, and weaknesses that came with it. Ezra knew what that meant. Even the strongest could be broken. "We've trained them for every contingency," Helena continued, as if reading his thoughts. "But the mission is suicide, Ezra. They know that. We all do. The Hovrak are entrenched on Valdraxis, their final stronghold, and the planet is practically a fortress. No one's ever made it through the atmosphere, let alone into their capital." Ezra clenched his fists. "And yet, we have no choice. If we don't take out their leaders now, humanity is finished." "We've got one shot at this," Helena said, her voice low. "The Warborn will infiltrate Valdraxis, take down the Hovrak command center, and destroy their leadership. If they succeed, the Hovrak will crumble. The Federation's forces can then mount a full counteroffensive." A moment of silence stretched between them, the weight of the mission pressing on everyone's shoulders. Finally, Ezra spoke, his voice heavy with resolve. "Prepare them, Helena. Get the Warborn ready. And God help us all." As the door slid shut behind her, Ezra stared at the screen again, his eyes scanning the last remaining reports of the Hovrak's advance. Time was running out. The Warborn were humanity's last hope. But even with their power, could they succeed where so many had failed? He didn't know. What he did know was this: if the Warborn didn't stop the Hovrak now, there would be no one left to fight tomorrow. The Warborn were not born, they were forged. In a secret compound beneath the surface of Mars, far from prying eyes, they were crafted, honed into the ultimate weapons. The Federation had invested decades of research into creating the perfect soldiers, each more than just a man or woman, but an amalgamation of the finest aspects of humanity and cutting-edge biotechnology. The Warborn were not mere soldiers. They were living, breathing symbols of humanity's strength, a blend of advanced genetics, cybernetic enhancements, and psychological conditioning. The process began long before their first breath. In the sterile, humbling halls of the Warborn facility, the candidates, selected from the Federation's best and brightest soldiers, underwent a series of brutal tests. Physical endurance, mental acuity, and psychological fortitude were pushed to their absolute limits. Only the strongest survived, enduring grueling physical trials, countless hours of combat simulations, and cutting-edge genetic modification. The Warborn were transformed into something more than human. They were warriors, champions, and saviors in one. Sergeant Elena Reyes, one of the Warborn, stood before a mirror in her personal quarters. Her reflection showed not just a woman, but a perfect soldier, a machine in human skin. Her muscles had grown stronger than any ordinary soldier's, her reflexes faster, her eyesight sharper. But it was the changes in her mind that terrified her most. Memories from before the enhancement seemed distant now, fading like old dreams. She could think faster, predict outcomes with chilling accuracy, and her emotions were far more controlled than they had ever been. She knew it was the result of the modifications, but there were times when she missed the humanity she had lost in the process. But there was no time for hesitation. In the Warborn's world, hesitation was weakness. The mission on Valdraxis was all that mattered now. Elena snapped her helmet into place, the sleek black surface locking in with a satisfying hiss. The rest of the Warborn were already assembling in the training hall. They were a sight to behold. 7 warriors, each enhanced in their own way, each a weapon in their own right. Sergeant Reyes was their leader, but she knew that every single one of them was capable of taking charge if needed. Each one was a master of their craft, their enhancements a key part of their individual strengths. Lieutenant Kian Voss, tall and lean, with cybernetic limbs that could lift entire vehicles with ease, cracked his knuckles as he prepared for the final phase of their training. He was the group's heavy hitter, capable of crushing through enemy lines with unstoppable force. Private Maya Alvarado, shorter than the others, but quicker than a striking serpent, adjusted the combat blades that extended from her forearms. Her agility and speed were unmatched. Then there was Commander Jax Thornton, the group's tactician. His psychic enhancements allowed him to predict enemy movements and read situations before they even happened, making him invaluable in planning their assault on Valdraxis. Despite the cold, calculated nature of their enhancements, there was a bond between the Warborn. They had become something more than comrades. They were a family. They trained together, bled together, and fought together. They were not just the last hope of humanity. They were humanity. A blaring alarm suddenly echoed through the hall, signaling the start of their final combat simulation. Without a word, the Warborn fell into formation, their movements fluid and synchronized. They were no longer just soldiers. They were a single organism, acting as one. The training arena shimmered to life, and the holographic images of Hovrak soldiers materialized in the air, charging at them with terrifying ferocity. The Warborn responded in perfect unison. Elena's enhanced senses allowed her to track the movements of each enemy soldier, while her enhanced strength allowed her to crush through their defenses with a single strike. Kian tore through the line of attackers, his limbs moving with a power that sent enemies flying. Maya danced through the chaos, her blades flashing as she disabled opponent after opponent with lethal precision. Jax stood back, directing their movements with calculated ease, his mind working at lightning speed, orchestrating their every move. The simulation ended in minutes. The Warborn had wiped out every last Hovrak soldier that had appeared. But as the holograms faded and the hall fell silent, Elena couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in her gut. The Hovrak they fought in the simulation were nothing compared to what awaited them on Valdraxis. The real battle would be much worse, and it would be the last battle for many of them. "Ready up," Elena said, her voice steady, betraying none of the unease she felt. "We're heading to Valdraxis. Our mission starts now." The Warborn stood tall, their resolve unshaken. This was it, the final test. There would be no second chances. The warship, Argonaut, cut through the endless void, its sleek hull gliding silently as the blackness of space stretched in all directions. The Warborn stood in silence inside the vessel, their eyes fixed on the holographic display that projected the planet Valdraxis, a world torn apart by war. The atmosphere was thick with toxic fumes, clouds of smoke from unending battles swirling ominously over its surface. The planet's surface was scared, marked by years of relentless bombardment and the aftermath of ancient conflicts. There was no beauty here, only the harsh reality of a world bent on destruction. Commander Elena Reyes stood at the front, her hands clasped behind her back as she stared at the monitor. Her gaze hardened, her mind racing through strategies and potential pitfalls. But no matter how many scenarios she ran, there was one certainty. This would be the last fight. There was no escape from this war, not for her or for the Warborn. 30 minutes to entry, the ship's A reported, its monotone voice breaking the silence. Elena's fingers twitched. The moment of truth was approaching. This wasn't just another mission. This was their final act. The Warborn had been forged for this moment, and she had no doubt that they could accomplish it. But in the back of her mind, a question lingered, unspoken. Would it be enough? The others stood nearby, preparing themselves in silence. Can Voss, always the stoic one, adjusted his cybernetic arms, the mechanical limbs clicking into place. Maya Alvarado tested the balance of her combat blades, her eyes darting over every corner of the room, as though anticipating an attack. Jax Thornton, the psychic tactician, ran his fingers through his short, dark hair, his gaze faraway. Elena knew he was already scanning ahead, calculating the possible outcomes in his mind with an almost supernatural precision. As the ship entered the atmosphere, the turbulence intensified. The Argonaut shuddered as it passed through the dense clouds of Valdraxis, a violent storm of wind and fire waiting to tear the ship apart. The ship's hull groaned in protest as they plummeted deeper. Elena could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of battle humming in her veins. "Engage shields," Elena ordered, her voice calm despite the chaos outside. The Warborn braced themselves, tightening their grips on the straps that secured them to their seats. The rumble of the ship's engines roared louder as it fought against the storm, and then, nothing. The ship's sudden stillness was deafening. For a moment, Elena allowed herself to feel the weight of the situation. They were heading into hell, and they had no guarantees of survival. But they were Warborn. Their purpose was clear, their mission simple. As the clouds parted, the volcanic landscape of Valdraxis revealed itself beneath them. Massive cities lay in ruins, cities that had once been vibrant centers of life, now twisted into fortresses of war. The Hovrak had turned the entire planet into a stronghold, an unassailable bastion that had never been breached. Until now. Approaching the drop zone, the AI said, snapping Elena out of her reverie. Landing gear deployed. With a violent jolt, the Argonaut slammed into the ground, the shockwave rattling through the ship's hull. Elena's heart raced, but she kept her focus, her hand gripping the armrest as the doors slid open. The Warborn were already on their feet, their weapons in hand, moving with practiced precision. "Go," Elena barked. The Warborn filed out in perfect formation, the harsh winds of Valdraxis whipping around them as they stepped onto the cracked earth. The sky above was thick with swirling ash, casting a dull, sickly light across the war-torn landscape. A city loomed in the distance, its silhouette a jagged outline against the polluted horizon. This was where it would all end, their mission to infiltrate the Hovrak stronghold, destroy their command, and end the war once and for all. But Elena could already sense it, the danger in the air. The Hovrak were no longer just soldiers, they had become something else, something darker. They had been waiting for the Warborn, and the moment their boots touched the ground, the first wave of Hovrak warriors emerged from the shadows. The Warborn didn't hesitate. Kian unleashed a primal roar as he charged forward, his cybernetic arms swiping through enemy ranks with brutal efficiency. Maya darted around him, her blades flashing as she incapacitated every Hovrak that came near. Jax, his eyes glowing with psychic energy, directed their movements, predicting every strike before it could land. Elena led the charge, her enhanced strength sending Hovrak soldiers flying as she carved her way through their defenses. Her mind raced, analyzing each move with cold precision. The Warborn had fought battles before, but this was different. The Hovrak had evolved since their last encounter, using new tactics, new weapons. There was something else at play here, a darker, more dangerous force. As the last of the Hovrak soldiers fell, Elena stood amidst the wreckage, scanning the horizon. A deep, guttural sound echoed from the distance, the unmistakable rumble of something massive stirring beneath the planet's surface. The Warborn had only just begun their mission, and already they could feel the presence of something far more powerful than they had imagined. Something ancient. This is just the beginning, Elena muttered to herself, gripping her weapon tighter. The real battle had only just begun. The Warborn moved swiftly through the ruins of Valdraxis, their boots crunching against the charred earth as the acrid stench of sulfur and burnt metal filled the air. Their mission was simple: infiltrate the Hovrak capital, eliminate their leadership, and end the war. But with each step they took deeper into the decimated city, the feeling that something was terribly wrong grew stronger. Commander Elena Reyes led the charge, her eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement around them. The battle had been fierce, but the Warborn had managed to clear the initial defenses with ruthless efficiency. They had expected resistance, but nothing like this. It was almost as if the Hovrak were retreating, pulling back to some unknown location. The streets had fallen eerily silent, as though the entire city was holding its breath. Something's off, Elena muttered to herself as she surveyed the path ahead. They should be fighting back harder than this. Her mind raced, running through every possible scenario. The Hovrak were tactical, ruthless, and had never given up ground easily. This sudden withdrawal didn't make sense. Was it a trap, or had they learned something that forced them to retreat? She didn't know, but the question gnawed at her. The rest of the Warborn were on high alert, moving with practiced precision. Caen Voss, the heavy hitter, kept his cybernetic arms flexed and ready, his senses attuned to the slightest movement. Maya Alvarado, lithe and fast, darted through the alleyways ahead, her combat blades glinting in the dim light. Jax Thornton, their psychic tactician, kept his mind open, scanning the surroundings with his enhanced abilities. He could feel something old, something powerful, lurking beneath the surface. "We're nearing the Hovrak Command Center," Jax said, his voice low. "But I'm sensing something else, something deeper." Elena glanced at him, her brow furrowing. "Explain." Jax closed his eyes for a moment, his face contorting with concentration. "I'm not sure. It's faint, like a pulse or a resonance, but it's coming from below. It's ancient, and it feels alive." The words hung in the air, sending a shiver down Elena's spine. Beneath the war-torn surface of Valdraxis, something ancient and powerful was stirring. It wasn't just the Hovrak that had made this world their stronghold. It was something else, something far more dangerous than anything the Warborn had been prepared for. "Keep moving," Elena ordered, her voice cutting through the unease that threatened to take hold. "We don't have time for distractions." But as they moved forward, the pulse grew stronger. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the air seemed to thrum with energy. It was as if the very planet itself was waking up, groaning in response to their presence. Elena's heart raced. She knew the Hovrak had been experimenting with ancient technology, but this felt different. This was not just a weapon. This was something alive. The Warborn finally reached the outskirts of the Hovrak Command Center, its towering spires cutting into the ash-choked sky. The structure was massive, designed to withstand even the most intense bombardments. But it was the underground complex beneath the command center that drew Elena's attention. The pulse was stronger here, vibrating through the very ground beneath their feet. "Everyone, stay sharp," Elena ordered. This could be a trap. We'll breach from below. The Warborn descended into the depths of the compound, their movements synchronized, their weapons ready. The corridors were dark, lit only by flickering lights that cast long, eerie shadows on the walls. The deeper they went, the heavier the air felt, thick with the oppressive weight of ancient technology. As they reached the lower levels, the pulse became deafening. It vibrated through their bones, filling their heads with an almost unbearable pressure. Alina's heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment, she wondered if they were walking into a nightmare. They reached a massive chamber, the walls lined with strange, alien machines, their designs unlike anything the Warborn had ever seen. And in the center of the room, lying dormant in a massive cylindrical chamber, was the source of the pulse, a creature, enormous and ancient, suspended in a network of mechanical tubes and wires. The creature's body was a grotesque fusion of flesh and machine, its skin rippling with unnatural energy. Its eyes, though closed, were disturbingly aware. The creature was alive, and it was waiting. Alina's breath caught in her throat. What in God's name is that? Jack stepped forward, his eyes wide with realization. This isn't just Hovrak technology. This is something older. Something much older. The creature's eyes flickered open, glowing with an unnatural light, and the entire chamber seemed to tremble in response. A guttural, rumbling voice filled their minds, echoing with ancient power. You should not have come here, Warborn. The Warborn froze. Whatever this creature was, it was not just a weapon. It was a force of unimaginable power. And now, it was awake. The creature's eyes gleamed with an unnatural, predatory intelligence as it stirred within the massive cylindrical chamber. Its mechanical limbs twitched, and for a moment, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Alina felt the cold weight of something far older, far more dangerous, than any foe she had ever faced settle around them like a suffocating fog. The voice in their minds rumbled again, a sound like distant thunder. You are the last of your kind. The Warborn, born of desperation, forged for this moment. But your time has passed. This world belongs to the Hovrak, and to me. Alina felt a cold dread crawl down her spine, but she forced it down. She had never faced something like this, but she was a Warborn. She was forged for battle, for moments like this. The mission was clear. They had come to stop the Hovrak, to end the war. But now, they were faced with something even greater. The creature's existence could turn the tide of the war in an instant. It had to be destroyed. Jax Thornton, his psychic abilities pulsing like a beacon, staggered back, his face contorted in pain. It's too much. I can't. The creature's voice invaded his mind with terrifying clarity. Your powers are nothing. Your mind is weak. I have witnessed countless worlds fall before me. You are insignificant. Maya Alvarado, her normally calm demeanor now a mask of determination, clenched her fists. We've taken down entire armies. We don't back down from anything. Her words were filled with defiance, but Alina could see the unease in her eyes. This wasn't a simple enemy. This wasn't something they had prepared for. The creature, still suspended in its mechanical prison, began to move again, its massive form vibrating with the power of its awakening. A low, ominous hum filled the chamber as the tubes and wires that connected the creature to the machine began to glow, thrumming with a dark energy that made the ground beneath their feet tremble. We were foolish to think we could win, Alina muttered, her eyes scanning the chamber. This thing, it's not just Hovrak technology. It's something older, something alien. The creature's form shuddered violently, and then its immense, armored head lifted, its eyes locking onto Alina with a piercing, calculating gaze. You have no understanding of what you face. I am ancient, I am eternal, and I am beyond your reach. Alina's pulse quickened as her mind raced. There was something about this being's presence that defied logic. The Hovrak might have been the immediate threat, but this creature, this thing, was something far worse. It wasn't just a machine or weapon. It was alive. A force of nature. Jax's voice broke through her thoughts. It's connected to the planet. The energy it's emitting is somehow tied to the core of Valdraxis itself. If it dies, this whole world could collapse. That's why the Hovrak are here, Alina realized aloud. They're not trying to control the planet. They're trying to harness it. This thing is their true weapon. The creature's smile, if it could be called that, stretched across its face like a grotesque mockery of a grin. You are wise, Warborn, but it will not help you. The Hovrak have long known my power. And you, insignificant humans, will be the next to fall. With a sudden, terrifying motion, the creature's limbs jerked free from the restraints that had held it. The machines that had been supporting it groaned and snapped as it flexed its arms. The chamber around them began to quake, the walls trembling as if the very foundations of Valdraxis were shaking in response to the creature's rise. We have to stop it, Alina growled, her voice low with fury and determination. Now. Cain Voss, his cybernetic arms clicking into position, stepped forward, his towering form like a living weapon. I'll take the first shot. Cover me. Without waiting for confirmation, Cain charged, his massive limbs swinging with a brutal force. The creature reacted instantly, its huge, glowing eyes narrowing as it swiped one of its powerful hands toward Cain. The air seemed to freeze for a split second before Cain was thrown back with a force that sent him crashing into the wall. Maya lunged forward, her combat blades drawn. She dashed at the creature, but it was too fast, its body twisting in ways that seemed impossible for a being of its size. It knocked her aside effortlessly, sending her crashing into the far corner of the chamber. Alina, Jax shouted, his voice trained. We need to destroy the heart of the machine. It's the only way to stop it. Alina's eyes darted to the pulsating core of the creature's prison, nestled deep within the mechanical mass. It was surrounded by energy conduits and alien technology, but it was the only vulnerable point. Alina, we don't have much time. Jax pressed, his psychic energy flaring in warning. Alina gave a sharp nod. There was no more time to hesitate. They had to act now, or all was lost. Everyone, on me. Alina commanded. We end this, here and now. The Warborn surged forward, their resolve hardening into unbreakable steel. This creature, this ancient horror, would not win. Not while they still had breath in their lungs. The Warborn had been forged for this moment, and they would see it through. The chamber trembled with the fury of battle as the Warborn rallied around Alina. The creature, a monstrous fusion of ancient technology and terrifying power, loomed above them. Its glowing eyes locked onto each of them, as if sizing up their chances. But the Warborn had no intention of backing down. Not now, not when the stakes were so high. Alina's mind was already working, calculating their best course of action. Cain, bruised but undeterred, was already pushing himself to his feet, his cybernetic limbs sparking with raw energy. Maya was quicker than ever, slipping past the creature's defenses, her blades gleaming in the dim light. Jax, though still reeling from the creature's psychic assault, was pulling himself together, his mind frantically searching for a solution. Alina, we can't keep trading blows with it. Jax called out, his voice trained. It's too strong. The machine's power is overwhelming. We need to hit the core, take out the heart. Alina nodded, her eyes never leaving the creature. The energy emanating from it was almost suffocating, a constant hum vibrating through her very bones. If they didn't act fast, the entire planet might collapse under the strain. She could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on her. We move in on the core now, she commanded. Cain, take point. Maya, create an opening. Jax, you're with me. Without waiting for a response, Cain surged forward, his cybernetic arms swinging like massive hammers. The creature recoiled as Cain's blow landed squarely against its chest, sending a ripple through its body. but it was only momentary. The creature's glowing eyes narrowed, and with a sudden fluid movement, it swung its massive arm at Kian, knocking him back with bone-crushing force. He crashed into the wall once again, but his resilience was unmatched. He struggled to his feet, undeterred by the pain. "Keep pushing," Elena shouted. Maya darted forward, moving like a blur. She was smaller, faster, and more agile than the others, and she used that to her advantage. Her blades flashed as she darted under the creature's massive form, slicing through its mechanical tendrils with lightning precision. The creature screeched in anger as its delicate systems were damaged, but it retaliated, thrashing its arm down at Maya. But she was already gone, slipping into the shadows to the side. Her voice echoed from the darkness. "I've got its blind spots. I'll keep it distracted." With Maya drawing the creature's attention, Elena and Jax moved toward the core. The path was treacherous, littered with sharp debris from the wreckage of the chamber. The pulse of energy grew stronger with every step they took, and Elena could feel her skin tingling, as if the very air was charged with raw power. "It's not just Hovrak tech," Jax muttered under his breath, his eyes scanning the glowing machinery that powered the creature. "This is ancient. I can feel it. This thing was created long before the Hovrak ever set foot on this planet. They didn't create it. They found it." Elena nodded grimly. "And now it's waking up. The Hovrak's mistake." They reached the central conduit, the heart of the machine. A massive core of pulsating energy, surrounded by intricate alien machinery, hummed with unnatural life. The air around it seemed to warp and bend, the gravity itself shifting with the raw power emanating from the core. "We need to destabilize it," Jax said, his mind already racing through the options. "I can try to short-circuit the systems, but it'll be risky." "Do it," Elena said firmly, turning to face the creature as it bellowed in fury at Maya's continued evasions. "We don't have time for caution." Jax closed his eyes, focusing. His psychic abilities flared to life, a web of energy expanding outward as he reached for the core systems. Elena watched him with a mix of awe and apprehension. She knew the risk he was taking. Every second he spent trying to disrupt the core was another second the creature could use to tear them apart. Suddenly, the creature let out a deafening roar, its body convulsing as it turned toward Elena and Jax. It had realized their plan. The ground beneath them trembled, and the chamber seemed to groan with the strain of the battle. The creature lunged, its massive limbs reaching for them. "Jax!" Elena shouted, diving toward him. He was still concentrating, his face contorted with effort, his psychic energy pouring into the core. "I'm almost there," he grunted. Elena spun, her enhanced reflexes kicking in as she activated her weapon. She fired a series of precision shots at the creature, aiming for its vital joints. The impact was immediate, but the creature barely flinched, its body pulsing with energy as it retaliated, swinging one massive arm toward them. The blow struck with the force of a meteor, sending Elena flying across the chamber. Pain shot through her chest, but she didn't let it stop her. She hit the ground hard, but her enhanced body absorbed the impact. "Jax!" she shouted, trying to push herself up. "Now!" With a final, concentrated burst of energy, Jax sent a wave of psychic force through the core. The machinery crackled, sparks flying, and then there was silence. A heartbeat, and then the explosion came. The core detonated in a cataclysmic burst of energy, sending a shockwave through the entire chamber. The creature let out one final earth-shattering scream before its body disintegrated into a mass of twisted metal and energy, its power fading into nothingness. The chamber fell silent. The Warborn stood, battered but alive. The heart of the machine had been destroyed. But as Elena looked at the ruins, she knew the war was far from over. The real battle, the one for humanity's future, had just begun. The air was thick with smoke, dust swirling through the wreckage of the chamber as the final echoes of the explosion reverberated through the ruins of Valdraxis. The creature, This ancient force of destruction was gone. Its colossal form lay in pieces, the glowing energy that had powered it dissipating into the void. But its death had come at a terrible cost. Alina Rice lay sprawled on the ground, her body battered and bruised from the explosion. She could feel the faint tremors of her heartbeat in her chest, her breath coming in shallow, labored gasps. She pushed herself to her knees, her enhanced vision blurring as she surveyed the aftermath of the battle. Kian was already up, his imposing frame covered in burns and scrapes, but there was a fire in his eyes. Maya was slowly rising to her feet as well, her combat blades stained with something darker than blood. And Jax was lying on the ground, his face pale and his breathing erratic. "Alina," Can grunted, his voice hoarse. "We did it. The creature, it's gone." "But, Jax." Alina's gaze snapped to Jax, her heart racing. He was still conscious, but barely. The psychic backlash from his disruption of the core had drained him, his powers flickering like a dying flame. She crawled toward him, her movements stiff and slow, feeling the weight of her own fatigue pressing down on her. "Jax," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Stay with me." He turned his head toward her, his eyes clouded with pain. I tried, Alina," he whispered, his voice distant. "I couldn't hold it back for long. It was too much. I think I might have broken something inside." "You did what you had to do," Alina replied, her voice fierce despite the exhaustion threatening to overtake her. "You saved us all." Jax managed a weak smile, but it quickly faded as he winced. "I can't hold on much longer." Alina's gaze hardened. She wouldn't let him die here. Not like this. He was a member of her team, a brother in arms. She glanced over at Kian and Maya, her eyes narrowing. "We need to get out of here," she ordered, her voice sharp with command. "Now, we've stopped the creature, but this planet isn't safe anymore. The Hovrak will be back." Kian nodded, his face set with determination. "Where do we go, Commander?" Alina stood slowly, her legs trembling beneath her. The pain was sharp, but it would fade. The war hadn't ended yet. "We head to the surface," she said, her voice unwavering. "We get back to our ship. We can't afford to stay here any longer. Not with what we've uncovered." As the Warborn began to move, Alina helped Jax to his feet, though he was weak and unsteady. Maya moved ahead, scouting their path, her movements precise and calculated. Kian was at the rear, watching for any signs of incoming threats. The corridors they moved through were eerily silent now. The oppressive hum of the ancient machine had gone, leaving only the haunting silence of a dead world. But Alina could feel it. Something was still lingering in the air, an unnatural weight that wouldn't leave so easily. The Hovrak had been using the creature's power to sustain their control over Valtraxis. Now that it was gone, the planet itself felt unstable. They reached the surface, emerging into the twilight of the planet's fractured sky. The battlefields that had once raged across the landscape were now quiet, the dust of battle settling over the broken remains of cities and fortifications. The Hovrak forces had retreated, but Alina knew that wasn't the end of the story. They wouldn't just give up their hold on Valtraxis so easily. As the Warborn made their way toward the waiting dropship, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that this victory had come at a heavy price. The creature they had destroyed had been a weapon, yes, but it was also a key. The Hovrak hadn't been here just for conquest. They had been here for something deeper, something more ancient than anything the Warborn could have prepared for. "What now, Commander?" Maya asked, her voice low. Alina's gaze was fixed on the distant horizon, where the remnants of Hovrak ships still hovered above the broken cities. The war had changed. It was no longer just about defeating an enemy. It was about understanding the true nature of the threat humanity faced. They had uncovered something far worse than a simple war. They had uncovered a truth that would alter the course of history forever. "We take the fight to them," Alina said, her voice filled with grim determination. "We go after the Hovrak, wherever they hide. We stop them from using this planet's power for whatever they're planning. And we do it before they can bring back anything worse than what we've already faced." The Warborn nodded in unison, their faces grim but resolute. The battle for Valdraxis was over, but the war for humanity's future was just beginning, and the Warborn would be ready. As they boarded their dropship and lifted off into the darkening skies, Alina knew that the cost of victory was high, but the stakes had never been clearer. The Warborn had been forged for this. They would face whatever came next. For humanity's survival, they would fight to the last breath. As the dropship ascended through the shattered skies of Valdraxis, Alina stared out of the viewport, her mind racing. The war they had just fought was over, but the truth was far darker than they had imagined. The destruction of the ancient creature had been a victory, but not the final one. The Hovrak forces had not been vanquished. If anything, they had just begun to understand the depths of the Hovrak's twisted plans. Alina clenched her fists, her knuckles white. The creature they had destroyed, the one that had powered their enemies, had been but a cog in a much larger machine. The Hovrak weren't just an invading force. They were scavengers, exploiting the very heart of ancient technologies long forgotten by the universe. Valdraxis wasn't just a battlefield. It was a key to unlocking powers that could reshape the galaxy itself. "Commander," Jack said from his seat beside her, his voice rough but clear, "we barely scraped by down there. And if I'm honest, I don't think we've even scratched the surface of what the Hovrak are planning." "I know," Alina replied quietly, her gaze hard. This wasn't just about conquering a planet. They were looking for something. And now they've lost it. They won't take kindly to that. Maya added from the back of the ship, her eyes flickering with barely contained tension. "They'll retaliate. They'll find another way to bring that creature back, or create something worse. We can't let them. Not now. Not after everything we've done." The ship jolted as it broke through the last layer of the atmosphere and into the vacuum of space. The stars were bright ahead, but they felt distant, cold. They weren't free yet. The Hovrak might have lost a powerful weapon, but they still had armies. They still had a stranglehold on much of the galaxy's most crucial resources. And the most terrifying part was that they still had the means to control things beyond even the Warborn's understanding. Alina's eyes hardened as she looked at her crew. They had faced impossible odds. They had stood against an enemy more powerful than they had ever imagined, and they had come through victorious. But she knew the fight was far from over. The Hovrak would rebuild. They would adapt, and they would be waiting. "We need to hit them before they have a chance to regroup," Alina said, turning to face her team. "We're not just going to wait for them to make the first move. We take the fight to them, hit their strongholds before they can rebuild their weapons. We hit them hard and fast." Kian's grin was all teeth. "I've always preferred the hit them hard part of the plan. I don't care if we hit them hard," Maya said sharply, "as long as we hit them somewhere they don't expect. We need to stay one step ahead of them. The last thing we want is to fight their full strength head-on again." "We're going to need more support," Jack said, his voice distant but thoughtful. "The Hovrak are too entrenched. If we're going to win, we need to find others who will stand with us." Alina nodded. "We can't do this alone. We'll need to find allies, and we need to gather as much intelligence as we can. We're not just fighting a military force here. We're fighting a force that's been manipulating the galaxy from the shadows. We'll need to know everything about them." Kian, always the optimist in the worst of times, slapped his hand on the console with a loud thud. "We've taken down the creature. We've seen what they're capable of. If we can rally more forces, there's no reason we can't take the fight straight to their capital. We go in, we hit them fast, and we don't give them a chance to fight back." Alina studied the view outside the ship's viewport, the stars twinkling in the distance like the distant hope they had left to cling to. The galaxy was vast, and their enemies were many, But they had something the Hovrak didn't: unity, a cause, and a relentless drive to protect everything they held dear. "If we're going to win," Alina said, turning back to her crew, "we need to be smarter. We need to make sure the Hovrak know we're coming. And we need to ensure that by the time they realize they've been outplayed, it's already too late." She stood tall, her voice unwavering as she laid out the plan. "We'll start with the Hovrak's communication hubs. We hit their supply lines, we destroy their weapons caches, and we cripple their ability to respond. We'll spread the word to the galaxy's remaining resistance forces. There's more out there than we think. And once we've done that, we'll move on their command center. We'll end this, once and for all." Jax's face, though still weary, lit up with renewed focus. "It's ambitious, but it might just work. We take away their ability to fight, and they'll have no choice but to surrender or burn. And we don't give them a chance to do either." "We won't give them the chance," Alina agreed. "We'll make sure they know that humanity is done being a pawn in their game." The Warborn had been forged for this moment, for the moment when humanity would rise up and take its future into its own hands. And now, with the war reaching its final, most dangerous phase, Alina knew they would give everything to see it through. The Hovrak might have controlled the galaxy for far too long, but the Warborn would make sure that the future belonged to humanity, and humanity alone. As the ship hurtled toward its next destination, Alina looked at her crew. They had survived the impossible. And now they would fight to ensure the galaxy's future, no matter the cost. The Warborn were more than just soldiers. They were humanity's champions. And they were ready.